The rain didn't just fall, it clawed at me, each drop a cold, sharp talon sinking into my skin as I stood on the marble steps of the mansion that no longer felt like a home. The night was alive with a restless energy, the kind that hums in the air before a storm breaks. Open secrets better left buried. Above me, the sky churned a bruised canvas of indigo and silver spitting water that tasted of iron and regret. The security lights, new, harsh, unforgiving, blazed down from the eaves, casting my shadow long and jagged across the driveway, a silhouette of a woman unmoored. My daughter Heather stood in the doorway, her silhouette framed by the warm glow of a chandelier that cost more than my life's savings. Her eyes, once soft as a child's, now glinted like polished obsidian, sharp and unyielding. "You'll get nothing, Mom," she said, her voice slicing through the rain's hiss. "Not a single cent." Her words landed like a curse, heavy with a power I didn't yet understand. Behind her, Eddie leaned against the doorframe. His arms crossed, a smirk, curling his lips like smoke from a hidden fire. His presence felt wrong, like a shadow cast by something I couldn't see. The gold watch on his wrist caught the floodlights winking at me as if it knew something I didn't. My suitcase, old and fraying, lay split open on the wet concrete, its contents shirts, a worn cardigans, a photograph face down spilling out, like offerings to a god who'd already turned away. The mansion loomed behind them, its windows gleaming with an unnatural amber light, as if the house itself were alive, watching, judging. I said nothing. Not because I was weak, but because silence is a blade you hone in the dark. Heather thought she was closing a door, but she didn't know, she couldn't know, that the key to her newfound empire was not hers to hold. The rain soaked my coat, plastering my gray hair to my scalp, but I felt something else beneath the cold, a spark faint but unyielding, like an ember buried in ash. It whispered a truth I'd carried for years, one I'd etched into the bones of my life, with every choice, every sacrifice. This wasn't her victory. It was mine, waiting to be claimed. The air shimmered, with an odd electricity, as if the storm itself were conspiring with me. I bent slowly to gather my scattered belongings, not out of defeat, but because I'd learned long ago that rushing through humiliation only sharpens its sting. The zipper of my suitcase gleamed like tiny mirrors reflecting the floodlight's glare. My fingers brushed the photograph, its wooden frame cool and worn smooth by years of touch. I turned it over. Heather at 7, her pigtails uneven because she'd squirmed while I tried to braid them, her gap-toothed grin bright enough to rival the sun. Her hand clutched mine in the image, a tether to a time when love was a language we both spoke fluently. "Don't," Heather snapped, her voice cracking like a whip, as if the photo itself were an intruder. Then softer, almost a plea. "Just go, Mom." Her tone carried a new weight, the kind money weaves into people who've never tasted power before. It was the voice of someone who'd rehearsed a speech in front of a mirror, mistaking cruelty for strength. Eddie's chuckle slithered through the air, low and oily, as he shifted his weight, his watch flashing again, a signal, a taunt or something else entirely. I studied her face, mirrored faintly in the glass of the frame. The girl I'd walked to school hand in hand had learned to stand on a threshold and call it a fortress. "I'm going," I said, my voice steady, a riverbed smoothed by years of carrying heavier things than this moment. "But you don't get to take what I paid for." My words hung between us, heavy with meaning she couldn't yet grasp. To her they might have meant the suitcase, the shirts, the socks. To me they meant something carved deeper, etched in ink and intention. Eddie laughed again, a sound like coins rattling in a tin cup. The ribbons tied to the iron railing of the porch fluttered in the wind, their soft clap, 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 a mocking applause for a scene we'd all pretended wouldn't come. The sold sign on the lawn swayed its glossy surface, catching the light like a promise written in someone else's hand. "Don't worry," I said, my eyes locking with Heather's for a moment longer than she expected. "I'm only taking what's mine." The wind shifted, carrying a faint hum, a sound not of the storm but something older, like the pulse of the earth itself. I pressed the photograph into the suitcase, forcing the broken zipper to hold with the weight of my palm. The wheels caught in a rivulet of rainwater, a vein of silver snaking toward the street. Eddie stepped forward, his voice dripping with false authority. "You heard her, Martha. Time to go." His watch glinted again, and for a fleeting second I swore I saw something in its reflection. A flicker of movement, a shape that didn't belong to this world. I blinked, and it was gone. "I heard her," I said, my tone as flat as the concrete beneath my feet. She made herself very clear. Heather's gaze wavered, not with guilt, but with the unease of someone who senses a storm they can't name. She didn't slam the door. That would have been too simple, too human. Instead, she let the open space do the work, the warm light from the foyer spilling out like a barrier I was no longer allowed to cross. I took a step back, my shoes squelching in a puddle that felt colder than it should. The sensation was sharp, like stepping off a ledge into a depth you can't measure. "Mom," Heather said. And for a heartbeat I heard the girl she'd been at 15, not the woman of 35 who stood before me now. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Her voice trembled not with sorrow, but with the weight of a choice she didn't yet understand. I looked past her into the hallway where lamps glowed with a sterile perfection, their light erasing the handprints, the crayon suns, the crooked shelves of our old life. The house was clean in a way that promised safety but delivered none. "I won't." I said my words a vow to myself more than to her. Not now, not anymore. The suitcase groaned as I dragged it down the steps, my knee protesting with a familiar ache, an old injury that whispered of battles fought long before this one. The rain carved paths through the driveway, carrying a button from my torn sleeve into the gutter. It bobbed once, twice, then vanished, a small surrender to the storm. I watched it go, knowing the things you stitch back together always unravel first. "I'll have the codes changed." Heather called after me, her voice more for herself than for me. A litany of new rules she thought would keep her safe. The gate, the garage, everything. Eddie snorted his watch, catching the light again, and this time I was certain the reflection held a shadow that moved against the rhythm of the rain, a shape that flickered like a memory not yet formed. "I don't need your codes," I said, turning to face her one last time. My words were soft, but they carried a weight that made her flinch. Eddie's smirk faltered, and for a moment the air between us crackled with something unspoken, something ancient. I didn't know what it was, not yet, but it felt like a promise, or perhaps a warning. I walked to my car, parked crookedly at the end of the driveway, a relic of a moment when I'd believed we could talk this out, that love could still bridge the gap between us. The wipers twitched, unsure, as if they sensed my hesitation. I lifted the trunk and slid the suitcase inside its thud like the closing of a book whose ending I hadn't written. When I turned back, Heather still stood in the doorway, her silhouette haloed by that unnatural light, a chalk outline of a daughter I no longer knew. "Goodbye, Mom," she said, her voice flat. A closing statement rather than a farewell. "Good night," I replied, climbing into the driver's seat. I didn't look in the rearview mirror as I pulled away. I didn't need to see the mansion shrink to know it had already let me go. Instead, I scanned the street where an empty moving box lay pinned under a stop sign, its edges dissolving into the gutter. Across the cul-de-sac, a porch light flickered, as if someone were keeping vigil, watching the storm unfold. The car's engine growled a low, unsteady pulse that matched the rhythm of my thoughts. I pressed the defroster and the fan whirred to life, clearing the glass with a reluctant sigh. My hands found the steering wheel 10 and 2, a habit from a driving class where they taught you to turn cones into people, so you'd never forget what you could lose. The rain shifted, slanting sideways under the old maple that spread over the lawn, like a guardian who'd forgotten how to protect. In the glove compartment, I found the threadbare towel Heather used to wrap around her hair after swimming lessons, its blue faded to the color of a bruise. It smelled of cheap laundry soap, the kind that promises spring but delivers only effort. I pressed it to my face, letting the water from my hair soak into its fibers, a dark stripe spreading like a secret finally told. At the first red light, my reflection flickered in the window, a ghost of myself superimposed over the gas station sign across the street, its red digits glowing with prices that had crept up since last week. Everything changes at the edge, even when the center holds. I watched a man in a hood sprint across the lot, clutching a paper bag as if it held his life's worth. He vanished into the fluorescent maw of the convenience store, and I felt the spark in my chest flare brighter, a fire kindled by something older than anger, stronger than grief. It was the certainty of a woman who'd spent her life signing her name on what was hers, a ritual as sacred as any spell. I pulled into the gas station, the tires hissing on wet concrete. The canopy above the pumps held the rain at bay, transforming its roar into a steady applause, as if the world were cheering for a truth I hadn't yet spoken. I cut the engine and sat in the sudden quiet, the kind that follows when a key turns and the machine in your chest takes over. Under the weak dome light, I opened my purse and sorted through its contents. House keys, a Metro card, a lipstick worn to a nub, a rubber band that always snapped when you trusted it not to. And there, tucked in the leather billfold older than Heather's children, was a receipt, its edges soft from years of being carried. I ran my fingertip over the paper, feeling the faint rays of ink. March 17th, 10:36 a.m. Gas and Go. Route 18, quick pick. The numbers stood like sentinels guarding a truth Heather hadn't bothered to check. I tucked the receipt back, my breath steady, my hands calm. The trick to not breaking is knowing which part of you can bend. I looked up at the convenience store's window, a glowing screen tuned to the lives of strangers, a woman in scrubs, buying a soda, a teenager hefting a case of water, a man in a ball cap leaning on the lottery stand. His hope as fragile as the pen tethered to its chain. The bell above the door chimed as I stepped inside, a polite sound that felt out of place in the night's raw edge. The air smelled of stale coffee and a mop that had tried its best. The cashier, Tom, glanced up, his eyes carrying the warmth of a man who'd seen me buy milk on 100 Mondays and knew better than to ask if life had gotten easier. "Evening, Ms. Collins," he said. "Evening, Tom." "Tom," I replied, my voice steady, though the spark in my chest burned hotter now, fed by a certainty I couldn't yet name. I stood by the lottery stand, not for the tickets, but for the bench beside it where I could sit and let the ache in my knee quiet itself. The plastic sleeves held a rainbow of promises. Pick 5, dream, draw, cash ball, names crafted by people who knew how to sell hope. But I wasn't here for hope. I was here for proof. In my purse, the lighthouse keychain shifted, its chipped paint catching the fluorescent light. Heather had chosen it for me at a beach stand when she was 10, convinced that souvenirs could anchor a life to a moment. Its weight felt heavier than it should, as if it carried more than memory. I turned it in my palm, feeling the raised letters, Gas and Go, Route 18, press into my skin like a map I'd forgotten I'd drawn. The fluorescent hum above me seemed to pulse in time with my heartbeat, and for a moment, I swore I heard a whisper, not from the store, but from somewhere deeper, older, as if the keychain itself were speaking. "All right," I said softly to no one, but the part of me that had waited too long to be heard. "We'll do this the right way. We'll do this slowly." The rain outside applauded, and the lighthouse in my hand gleamed like a beacon in a storm I was only beginning to navigate. The gas station's fluorescent glow lingered in my mind as I drove through the rain, the road ahead blurring into a silver ribbon that seemed to unravel the years. My hands gripped the steering wheel, the lighthouse keychain dangling from the ignition, its chipped paint catching the dashboard's faint light. It swayed with each turn, a metronome ticking backward through time, pulling me into memories I hadn't visited in years, not because they were forgotten, but because they were too heavy to carry every day. The rain drummed a rhythm on the roof, a chant that urged me to remember to piece together the threads of a life that had led to this moment. I saw Heather at 7, her pigtails uneven under a straw hat, too big for her head, her laughter spilling like coins from a jar as we walked hand in hand to the county fair. She'd clutched a paper cone of cotton candy, its pink fluff dissolving on her tongue, staining her lips the color of dreams. "Mama," she'd said, pointing to a lighthouse-shaped keychain on a vendor's stall. "It's like a star that stays put." I'd bought it for her, $3 I couldn't spare, but her smile was worth more than any paycheck. That was the summer she'd begged to sleep with the windows open, convinced the ocean's whispers would carry her to sleep. I'd kept the keychain for myself after she lost interest, a talisman of a time when love was as simple as a shared secret. The memory shifted, the edges softening, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Heather at 12, her knees scabbed from climbing the oak in our backyard, her eyes bright with questions I couldn't always answer. We lived in a duplex, then its walls thin enough to hear the neighbors' arguments, its linoleum floors curling at the edges like a book read too many times. Money was a guest that never stayed long, slipping out the door before the bills could catch it. I worked 2 jobs, mornings at the diner where the coffee was as bitter as the tips, and nights at the warehouse where the air smelled of cardboard and regret. My hands learned the weight of trays, boxes, and promises I made to Heather, that we'd be okay, that the lights would stay on, that she'd go to college one day. I kept a notebook, leather-bound and fraying, where I tracked every penny, groceries, rent, Heather's school supplies, the occasional ice cream cone when her grades came home with gold stars. Each entry was a spell, a way to bind chaos to order, to make the world bend to our needs. The numbers were my incantations written in blue ink that smudged under my thumb, a reminder that control is fragile, but not impossible. Heather would watch me at the kitchen table, her chin propped on her hands, and ask, "Why do you write it all down, Mama?" I'd smile and say, "Because what you name you own." She'd laugh, not understanding, but I saw the spark in her eyes, the same one that burned in mine now, driving through the rain. The keychain swung again, and the memory shifted to the gas and go on Route 18, our weekly ritual. It started when Heather was 16, her driver's license still warm from the DMV, her excitement a living thing that filled the car. We'd pull into the lot, the neon sign buzzing like a trapped firefly, and she'd beg to buy a lottery ticket. "Just one, Mama," she'd say, her voice bright with the kind of hope only youth can afford. I'd relent, not because I believed in luck, but because I believed in her. The clerk, Tom, would grin and slide a ticket across the counter, his eyes crinkling like he knew a secret we didn't. "Quick pick, Ms. Collins," he'd ask, and I'd nod, watching the machine spit out numbers that felt like whispers from a future we couldn't see. I signed every ticket always. It was a habit born from a story Tom told one humid July evening about a man who'd lost a winning ticket because he hadn't claimed it with his name. "Ink's cheaper than regret," he'd said, tossing me a pen with a chewed cap. So I'd write Martha Collins in careful cursive on the back of each ticket, the pen's scratch a small act of defiance against a world that took more than it gave. Heather would laugh, calling it my magic spell, but she'd mimic me, her own name scrawled in loopy letters beside mine. "If we win," she'd say, "we split it 50-50. "Deal," I'd nod, sealing the pact with a smile, the ticket tucked under a magnet on the fridge. A lighthouse, of course. Its red and white stripes faded from years of holding our hopes. Those were the years when Heather's dreams were as big as the sky, when she'd talk about becoming a teacher, a writer, a someone who mattered. I'd listen, stirring spaghetti on the stove, the steam curling like ghosts around us. I paid for her SAT prep with overtime hours, drove her to college tours in a car that rattled like it was coughing up its last breath, and patched her prom dress with stitches so fine they were invisible. When her first boyfriend broke her heart, I held her as she cried, her tears soaking my sweater, and whispered that she was enough, always enough. The notebook grew thicker, its pages, a map of sacrifices: $200 for her textbooks, $50 for her field trip, $1,000 from my retirement fund to cover her dorm deposit. Each entry was a brick in the foundation I built for her, a life I hoped would be softer than mine. But the world doesn't bend easily, not even for love. Heather's college years brought distance, not in miles, but in the way her calls grew shorter, her visits rarer. She'd met Eddie, a man whose charm was as slick as the oil stains in the Gas and Go's parking lot. He wore cologne that lingered like a warning, and his promises were as bright as his watch, the one that gleamed with a light that seemed to shift when you looked too long. Heather started skipping our lottery ritual, her laughter replaced by texts that arrived late, if at all. Busy, she'd write or talk soon. The fridge magnet held fewer tickets, but I kept signing them my name, a quiet vow to the girl who'd once believed in stars that stayed put. The keychain clinked against the ignition, and another memory rose sharp as a blade. March 17th, a day like any other, except for the way the air felt charged like the moment before a lightning strike. I'd stopped at the Gas and Go alone, Heather too busy with Eddie to join me. The store was quiet, the hum of the coolers, a low chant that seemed to echo in my bones. Tom handed me the ticket, his fingers brushing mine, and for a moment I felt a pull like the tide calling to something deep within me. "Sign it quick, Ms. Collins," he said, his voice oddly urgent. "Some things need claiming before they're lost." I'd laughed thinking he was joking, but I signed the ticket anyway, my name. A flourish of ink that felt heavier than usual, as if it carried the weight of a truth I hadn't yet seen. I taped that ticket to the fridge, its corners curling slightly, the lighthouse magnet pinning it like a sentinel. Heather came by the next day, her eyes darting to the ticket, her fingers twitching as if she wanted to touch it but didn't dare. "You still do that?" she asked, her voice light but edged with something I couldn't name. I nodded, stirring soup on the stove, the steam curling like a question mark between us. She took a photo of the fridge, her phone's flash glinting off the magnet, and I wondered why she'd captured a moment so ordinary. Later I'd find that photo on her social media, captioned with words that felt like a code, "New beginnings start small." The ticket was still there when I checked that night, my name inked on its back, a quiet promise I didn't know I'd need to keep. The memories piled like leaves, each one crisp and fragile, ready to crumble under scrutiny. I saw the duplex's sagging porch where Tammy, my neighbor, would bring lasagna on Sundays, her laughter a balm for the weeks when the bills outran my paycheck. I saw the grandchildren, their small hands sticky with jelly, their voices a chorus of "Nana, look," as they drew lighthouses on scrap paper. I saw the notebook, as pages a testament to years of holding a family together with nothing but will and ink. And I saw Heather slipping away, her eyes clouded by a hunger I didn't recognize, her steps guided by a man whose watch seemed to tick to a rhythm not of this world. The rain slowed as I pulled into my apartment complex, the car's engine settling into a tired hum. The lighthouse keychain glinted its weight, a reminder of the girl who'd chosen it, the woman who'd forgotten it, and the mother who'd never stopped carrying it. I stepped out, the air cool and sharp, carrying the scent of wet asphalt, and something else, something like salt and iron, like the sea calling from a place I couldn't see. My knee ached as I climbed the stairs, each step a reminder of the years I'd carried more than my share. The apartment was dark, its silence a canvas for the memories still swirling in my mind. I set my purse on the table, the keychain clinking against the wood, and opened the notebook. Its pages fell open to March 17th, the entry simple but precise. Gas and Go $2 lottery ticket, quick pick. Below it in smaller script I'd written the numbers, not because I thought they'd win, but because naming things gave them shape, gave them power. The receipt was still in my purse, its ink faded but legible, a relic of a moment when the world still felt like it could be mine. I pressed it into the notebook, the paper crinkling like a whisper of something ancient, something waiting to be heard. The apartment's single window framed the storm outside, its clouds parting to reveal a sliver of moon pale as bone. I stood there, the keychain in my hand, its surface warm despite the cold. The lighthouse's outline seemed to pulse a faint glow that wasn't there before, or perhaps had always been there waiting for me to notice. I closed my eyes, and the hum from the gas station returned, not a sound but a feeling, like the tide pulling at the edges of my soul. I was Martha Collins, a woman who'd signed her name on what was hers, who'd carried a family through years of want, who'd built a life from scraps and stubbornness. And I was something more. Something. The storm knew something. The keychain whispered something Heather had forgotten, but would soon remember. I opened my eyes, the moon's light sharper now, cutting through the dark like a blade. The notebook lay open its pages, a map of a life I'd fought for, a life I wouldn't let slip away. The ticket was mine not because of luck, but because I'd claimed it with every choice, every sacrifice, every stroke of ink. Heather thought she held the key to a new world, but she didn't know she couldn't know that the lighthouse in my hand was more than a trinket. It was a beacon, and I was its keeper, ready to guide the truth home. The rain had softened to a drizzle by the time I reached my apartment, the keychain's faint glow dimming as I turned off the ignition. Its weight in my palm felt like a promise, or perhaps a warning, as if it knew the path I was about to tread. The storm outside had quieted, but inside me another was brewing, a slow churning tide of realization that something had shifted, not just in Heather, but in the very air between us. I carried the suitcase up the stairs, its broken zipper rasping like a voice trying to speak. The hallway smelled of damp wood and Tammy's lavender candles, a faint comfort against the cold certainty settling in my bones. Heather had changed, and the ticket, the one I'd signed with my name, my will, was at the heart of it. I set the suitcase by the door and lit a single lamp, its yellow light pooling on the table like a spotlight on a stage where I was both actor and audience. The notebook lay open, its pages whispering of March 17th, of numbers scrawled in blue ink, of a receipt that held more than a transaction. I traced the entry with my finger, feeling the indentations of my own handwriting, each stroke a tether to a truth I hadn't yet fully grasped. The lighthouse keychain sat beside it, catching the lamplight in a way that made it seem alive, its chipped paint pulsing faintly as if it were breathing in time with my thoughts. I closed my eyes, and the hum from the gas and go returned, not a sound, but a sensation, like a current running through the roots of the world. The memories came unbidden, sharp and vivid like shards of glass catching the light. Heather had always been a creature of movement, her energy spilling over like water from a cracked cup. But in the months before the storm, before the mansion and the floodlights, she'd grown still in a way that unnerved me. Her laughter, once as bright as the fairground lights, had faded to a clipped, careful tone, as if she were guarding a secret she didn't fully understand. She'd started spending hours on her phone, her thumbs dancing across the screen, her eyes darting away when I asked who she was texting. Just friends, she'd say, her voice light but brittle, like ice about to crack. I'd nod, stirring soup or folding laundry, but the air in the room felt heavier, as if her words were only half the truth. It started with small things, the kind you notice but don't name until they pile up like stones in a riverbed, redirecting the flow. She stopped coming to the gas and go with me, her excuses piling up like unpaid bills, a late shift, a friend's birthday, a vague "I'm busy." When she did visit, her eyes would flick to the fridge, to the lighthouse magnet pinning the latest ticket, its red and white stripes a beacon in our small kitchen. She'd linger there, her fingers brushing the magnet as if it held a weight she couldn't lift. "Still doing the lottery thing, Martha?" she'd ask, her voice edged with something new. Disdain, or perhaps envy. She'd started calling me Martha, not Mom, a shift that cut deeper than I let on. Each time I'd smile and say, "Some habits stick," but my heart noted the change, filing it away like an entry in my notebook. The keychain seemed to hum in my hand, its glow flickering, as another memory surfaced. It was late February, the air thick with the promise of spring, when Heather came by unannounced. She'd stood in the kitchen, her coat still on, her eyes scanning the room as if she were cataloging it for someone else. "You ever think about starting over?" she'd asked, her voice soft but sharp like a blade wrapped in silk. I'd paused, the spoon in my hand dripping soup onto the counter, and looked at her. Her hair was pulled back, her face bare of the makeup she used to wear like armor, but her eyes held a hunger I didn't recognize, a need for something bigger than the life we'd built. "Starting over's just another way of running," I'd said, wiping the counter with a rag that smelled of lemons and thyme. "Better to keep what's yours and make it work." She'd laughed a sound that didn't reach her eyes and snapped a photo of the fridge with her phone. The flash glinted off the lighthouse magnet, and for a moment I swore the light lingered, as if the magnet itself were holding on to the moment. "Just for memories," she'd said, but her fingers trembled as she tucked the phone away, and I wondered what she saw in that ticket that I didn't. That night after she left, I checked the ticket on the fridge. My name was there, Martha Collins, inked in cursive, that hadn't wavered in years. But something felt off, like the air after a door closes too quietly. I'd started signing the tickets at the counter after that, right in front of Tom, his nod, a silent acknowledgement that some things needed guarding. The hum in the gas and go grew stronger each time, a vibration that seemed to come from the earth itself, as if the store were a crossroads where truths waited to be claimed. I didn't tell Heather, but I felt it. The ticket from March 17th was different, heavier, as if it carried a destiny I hadn't chosen but couldn't escape. Her visits grew rarer, her calls shorter until they were little more than static on a line that used to hum with warmth. When we did talk, she'd speak in fragments, her words clipped like coupons cut from a magazine. "I'm fine, Martha. Just busy. Eddie's got this thing planned." Eddie. His name slithered into our conversations like a snake through tall grass, and each mention tightened the knot in my chest. I'd seen him only once before the mansion, at a diner where Heather had asked me to meet her. He'd sat across from me, his gold watch catching the light, his smile sharp as a blade. "You've got a great daughter," he'd said, but his eyes were on the ticket in my purse, the one I'd signed that morning, as if he could see through leather and intent. The watch. It was always the watch. Its face gleamed with a light that seemed to shift like a mirage you couldn't pin down. In the diner I'd caught a reflection in its glass, a flicker of something not quite human, a shadow that moved against the rhythm of the world. I'd blinked, and it was gone, but the unease lingered, a pebble in my shoe I couldn't shake. Heather hadn't noticed her laughter too loud, her hand resting on his arm as if he were an anchor instead of a weight. "Eddie's got big plans," she'd said, her voice bright with a hope I didn't trust. I'd nodded, sipping coffee that tasted of ash, and filed the moment away, another entry in the ledger of things that didn't add up. The signs multiplied, each one a thread in a tapestry I was only beginning to see. Heather's social media posts, once rare, became a flood. Photos of new shoes, a leather purse, a glass of wine held against a sunset that didn't belong to our town. Her captions were cryptic, like riddles meant for someone else. "The future starts now. No looking back." I scrolled through them late at night, the phone's blue light casting shadows that seemed to dance on their own. One post stopped me cold, a photo of her hand holding a lottery ticket, not ours but close enough to make my heart stutter. The caption read, "Dreams come true when you claim them." The ticket was blank in the photo, no name visible, but the lighthouse magnet in the background was unmistakable, its stripes a silent accusation. I sat back, the notebook open before me, the keychain glowing faintly under the lamp. The hum was there again, stronger now, a pulse that seemed to come from the keychain itself. I held it up, its weight heavier than it should be, and the light shifted, casting a pattern on the wall, a spiral like the steps of a lighthouse winding upward. For a moment I saw her, Heather, not as she was now, but as she'd been at 15, her eyes bright with dreams of a world bigger than our duplex. "Mama," she'd said once, pointing to the stars, "they're like lighthouses guiding us home." I'd laughed, but now the memory felt like a warning, as if she'd known something I hadn't, as if the stars themselves had been trying to tell me. The suspicion took root then, not as anger, but as a quiet certainty, like a seed breaking through soil. The ticket from March 17th, the one I'd signed at the counter, the one Heather had photographed, was the key. She hadn't checked the back, hadn't seen my name, hadn't realized that the fortune she claimed was built on a foundation that wasn't hers. I opened my purse and pulled out the receipt, its edges soft from being carried, its ink, a testament to a moment when I'd felt the world shift. March 17th, 10:36 a.m. Gas and Go, Route 18. Quick pick. The numbers matched the ones in my notebook, the ones I'd written as a habit, not a hope. but now they felt like a spell, a binding I'd woven without knowing its power. I stood and walked to the window, the drizzle outside a soft curtain that blurred the world beyond. The moon was higher now, its light sharp and unyielding, cutting through the clouds like a blade through doubt. I thought of Eddie, his watch the shadow in its reflection. I thought of Heather, her eyes clouded with a hunger that wasn't hers alone. And I thought of the ticket my name inked on its back, a claim that no mansion, no floodlight, no betrayal could erase. The keychain pulsed in my hand, its glow steady now, as if it were guiding me toward a truth I was only beginning to understand. I wasn't just Martha Collins' mother, widow keeper of a notebook and a fraying life. I was something more, a woman who'd signed her name on what was hers, who'd carried a family through years of want, who'd held on to a lighthouse when the world tried to drown her. The hum grew louder, a song only I could hear, and I knew this was no ordinary fight. The ticket, the keychain, the storm. They were pieces of a puzzle, older than me, older than Heather, older than the betrayal that had brought me here. I set the keychain down, its light spilling across the table, and opened the notebook to a new page. I wrote one word, truth. The lamp flickered, and for a moment the room seemed to breathe the air thick with the scent of salt and iron, like the sea calling from a place I couldn't yet name. I was ready not for revenge but for reclamation. Heather thought she'd won, but she hadn't seen the back of the ticket. She hadn't seen me. The apartment was a cocoon of shadows, the single lamp casting a golden circle on the table where my notebook lay open. Its pages a testament to a life stitched together with care and ink. The lighthouse keychain rested beside it, its chipped paint gleaming faintly as if it held a light that refused to dim. The hum I'd felt at the gas and go lingered in my chest, a pulse that seemed to sync with the rhythm of the rain outside, now a soft murmur against the window. I sat in the quiet, the receipt from March 17th pressed between my fingers, its edges worn, but its truth unyielding. Gas and Cs go. Route 18. 10:36 a.m. Quick pick. My name was on the ticket, a signature carved in ink, and will a claim Heather hadn't thought to check. But I would make her see it. Not with anger, but with proof, sharp, undeniable, and mine. The spark in my chest flared, no longer a flicker, but a steady flame, fed by years of carrying more than my share. I wasn't just a mother scorned or a woman cast out. I was Martha Collins, keeper of a notebook, bearer of a lighthouse, a woman who'd learned that truth is a blade you wield with precision. The keychain pulsed in my hand, its glow casting a spiral on the wall, a pattern that seemed to spiral inward, drawing me toward a destiny I hadn't chosen, but could no longer avoid. I opened the notebook to a new page and wrote evidence. The word felt like a vow, a spell, a lighthouse beam cutting through the fog. I started with what I had. The receipt was the first piece, its numbers matching the ones I'd scrawled in the notebook on March 17th, the day the air had felt charged like the world was holding its breath. I smoothed it flat, its ink smudged but legible, and placed it in a plastic sleeve, the kind I'd used to protect Heather's report cards when she was small. Next, I pulled my phone from my purse, its screen cracked but functional, and opened Heather's social media. Her posts were a gallery of excess new dresses, a sleek car, a glass of champagne raised against a skyline that wasn't ours. But it was the photo from February that stopped me, the one of the fridge, the lighthouse magnet pinning the ticket in place. My ticket, my name. I saved the image. The timestamp, a silent witness, February 28th, 14 p.m. The keychain's glow seemed to brighten as if approving my work, and I felt the hum again, stronger now, like a tide pulling me forward. I needed more than a receipt and a photo. I needed proof that couldn't be dismissed, evidence that would stand in a court of law or a court of fate. The gas and go was my next step, the place where this story had begun, where I'd signed my name and felt the world shift. I slipped the notebook and keychain into my purse, their weight grounding me, and stepped back into the night. The rain had stopped, leaving the air sharp with the scent of wet earth, And something else salt iron the faint tang of the sea, as if the lighthouse in my hand were calling to a shore I couldn't yet see. The drive to the Gas and Go was quiet, the roads slick and reflective, mirroring the stars that had begun to pierce the clouds. The neon sign buzzed as I pulled into the lot, its red and green glow a beacon in the dark. The store was nearly empty, save for Tom behind the counter, his apron stained with coffee and time. He looked up as the bell chimed, his eyes crinkling with a warmth that felt like home. "Ms. Collins," he said, his voice steady, but laced with something deeper, as if he sensed the weight of my purpose. "Didn't expect you back so soon. I need your help, Tom," I said, my voice low but firm, the flame in my chest burning brighter. "The ticket from March 17th. I need to prove it's mine." His eyebrows lifted, but he didn't ask questions. Instead, he nodded, as if he'd been waiting for this moment, as if the store itself had known I'd return. He gestured to the back, where a small office held a computer and a stack of dusty binders. "Camera footage," he said. "We keep it for 30 days, but I can pull older stuff if you give me a date." March 17th. I said the words carrying a weight that made the air hum. 10:36 a.m. Tom tapped the keyboard, his fingers slow but deliberate, and the screen flickered to life, showing the counter from that morning. There I was, my gray hair tucked under a scarf, my hand signing the ticket with a pen Tom had handed me. The footage was grainy, but my signature was clear, my name, a bold stroke against the ticket's white back. "Can you save this?" I asked, my heart steady, despite the hum that seemed to vibrate through the floor. Tom nodded, burning the clip onto a USB drive, his movements precise, as if he were handling something sacred. "Anything else?" he asked, his eyes meeting mine, and for a moment I saw something in them, a flicker like the shadow I'd seen in Eddie's watch, a glimpse of something beyond the ordinary. I shook my head, but the hum grew louder, and the keychain in my purse felt warm, as if it were alive, urging me to keep going. "I need the transaction log too," I said. "Something to match the receipt." Tom pulled a binder from the shelf, its pages yellowed but meticulous, and found the entry for March 17th. 10:36 a.m. Quick pick, $2 paid cash. He printed a copy, signing it with his own name, a witness to my truth. "You're building a case," he said, not a question but a statement, his voice carrying the weight of someone who'd seen the world take more than it gave. "Be careful, Ms. Collins. Some people don't like truth when it shines too bright." I thanked him, slipping the USB drive and printout into my purse, their weight joining the keychains. As I turned to leave, the bell above the door chimed, and Denise, the store manager, stepped in, her coat dripping from the drizzle that had started again. "Martha," she said, her voice soft but sharp, like she'd sensed the hum, too. "You okay?" I nodded, but her eyes lingered on my purse, as if she could see the light spilling from it. "Come back tomorrow," she said. "I'll certify the footage for you. Legal stuff, you know." Her offer felt like more than kindness, like a thread in a tapestry I was only beginning to weave. Back in my apartment, I spread the evidence on the table, each piece a stone in the foundation of my claim. The receipt, the photo, the USB drive, the transaction log, they were more than paper and pixels. They were my story, written in ink, and light, a narrative I'd crafted with every sacrifice, every late shift, every dollar saved for Heather's future. The keychain glowed brighter now, its spiral pattern dancing on the wall, a map of a journey I hadn't chosen but was ready to walk. I opened my laptop and began drafting a letter to the State Lottery Commission, my words careful but unyielding, a declaration that the ticket was mine, signed and claimed on March 17th. The hum grew stronger as I typed, the air thick with the scent of salt and iron, as if the sea itself were watching. I paused, my fingers hovering over the keys, and looked at the keychain. Its light pulsed in time with my heartbeat, and for a moment I saw it. A vision, sharp and fleeting, of a lighthouse standing on a cliff, its beam cutting through a storm that wasn't just rain, but something older, deeper, a tempest of truths waiting to be named. I blinked, and the vision faded, but the certainty remained. This wasn't just about a ticket. It was about reclaiming what was mine, not with force, but with the quiet power of a woman who'd learned to hold fast in the dark. The next morning I returned to the gas and go, the keychain warm in my pocket, its glow a steady guide. Denise was waiting her certification of the footage notarized and sealed her signature, a second witness to my claim. "You're doing the right thing," she said, her eyes meeting mine, and I saw it again, the flicker, the shadow, as if the store itself were a crossroads where fates were decided. I thanked her, my voice steady, the flame in my chest a beacon now burning bright enough to light my path. Back home I organized the evidence into a folder, each piece labeled, and dated a testament to a truth Heather couldn't erase. The receipt, the footage, the transaction log, the social media post, they were my arsenal not of anger, but of clarity. I added a copy of the notebook's page from March 17th, its numbers a spell I'd cast without knowing its power. The keychain sat on the table, its light spilling across the folder, and I felt the hum again, a song that seemed to come from the earth itself, urging me forward. Tammy knocked on my door that afternoon, her lasagna dish warm in her hands, her smile a balm against the weight of the morning. "You look like you're fighting a war," she said, setting the dish on the counter. I laughed, but the sound was hollow, and she tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "You need a lawyer, Martha. My cousin Sarah, she's good. Helped me with my lease trouble last year." I nodded, the idea settling like a stone in a riverbed, redirecting the flow. Sarah. A name, a possibility, a step toward justice. I called Sarah that evening, her voice crisp but kind, a lawyer who'd seen enough to know when a story held weight. "Send me what you have," she said. "Receipts, footage, anything with your name." I described the ticket, the signature, the hum that seemed to follow me, though I didn't mention the keychain's glow or the visions it sparked. Some truths were too new to share. "This is a strong case," she said, her words a spark that fed the flame in my chest. "But we need to move fast. Money makes people desperate." I mailed the folder to the Lottery Commission the next day, using certified mail, the receipt another piece in my growing mosaic. I uploaded copies to their online portal, the keychain beside me, its light steady as I clicked submit. A confirmation email arrived with a case number that felt like a key to a door I hadn't yet opened. The hum was constant now, a rhythm that matched my pulse, as if the lighthouse in my hand were guiding me through a storm only I could see. That night my phone buzzed, a message from Heather lighting up the screen. "Martha, let's talk. This doesn't have to get messy." Her words were soft, but they carried a weight like a tide pulling back before a wave. I didn't respond. Not yet. The keychain glowed, its spiral pattern dancing on the wall, and I saw it again. The lighthouse, its beam cutting through a storm. Its light not just a guide, but a weapon, sharp and unyielding. I wrote in the notebook, case number, evidence sent, truth claimed. The hum grew louder, the air thick with the scent of salt and iron, and I knew this was no ordinary fight. The ticket was mine, but it was more than money. It was a legacy, a claim, a lighthouse beam that no storm could extinguish. I was Martha Collins, a woman who'd signed her name on what was hers, who'd carried a family through years of want, who'd held onto a spark when the world tried to drown it. And I was ready to shine. The morning sun broke through the clouds, casting a pale light across my apartment, its rays catching the lighthouse keychain on the table. The chipped paint glowed faintly as if it had absorbed the storm's energy, and now held it, a beacon pulsing with a rhythm only I could feel. The folder of evidence sat beside it, receipt, USB drive, transaction log, social media printouts. Each piece a brick in the wall I was building, not to keep Heather out, but to bring the truth in. The hum that had followed me from the gas and go was constant now, a low vibration that seemed to rise from the earth itself, weaving through my bones like a song of salt and iron. I was no longer just Martha Collins, mother-widow, keeper of a fraying notebook. I was a lighthouse steady in the storm, and the light I cast was sharp enough to cut through lies. I stood at the window, the keychain warm in my palm, its spiral pattern flickering on the glass like a map to a place I was only beginning to understand. The notebook lay open, the word truth scrawled on its final page, a vow that felt heavier than the paper could hold. The confirmation email from the Lottery Commission glowed on my laptop screen, its case number 472819, a key to a door I was ready to unlock. The hum grew louder, and for a moment I saw it again. The lighthouse on a cliff, its beams slicing through a tempest, not of rain but of shadows, as if the world itself were testing my resolve. I blinked and the vision faded, but the certainty remained. This was my fight, and I would win it not with anger, but with the quiet power of a woman who'd learned to name what was hers. The first step was the post office, a small brick building where the air smelled of paper and glue. I carried the folder, its contents sealed in a certified envelope, the weight of it grounding me as I handed it to the clerk. "Make sure it gets there," I said, my voice steady, though the hum pulsed in my chest, urging me to move faster. The clerk nodded, stamping the receipt with a date August 20th, 2025, that felt like a milestone, a marker in a journey I hadn't chosen but would see through. I tucked the receipt into my notebook, another entry in the ledger of my life, and stepped back into the sunlight. The keychain glowed in my purse, its light spilling through the leather, as if it were impatient to guide me forward. Sarah Monroe's office was on the third floor of a building that smelled of coffee and ambition, its walls lined with certificates that gleamed like promises. Sarah was younger than I'd expected, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, her eyes sharp but kind, like a hawk that knew when to hunt and when to watch. "Martha," she said, gesturing to a chair across from her desk, "you've got a strong case. The signature, the footage, the receipt. It's a solid foundation." I handed her the folder, my hands steady despite the hum that seemed to vibrate through the room, making the air shimmer like heat off asphalt. She flipped through the pages, her fingers pausing on the transaction log, her lips curving into a smile that held no warmth, only resolve. "They won't see this coming," she said, "but we need to be thorough. Every step has to be airtight." We spent the morning drafting a letter to Heather's attorney, a formal demand to preserve evidence, bank records, real estate transactions, anything tied to the lottery winnings. Sarah's pen moved with precision, each word a stone in the path we were paving. "We'll request a hold on the funds," she said, her voice calm but unyielding, like the tide before it claims the shore. "The commission's already flagged the account thanks to your submission. Heather won't be able to spend another dime until this is resolved." I nodded, the flame in my chest burning brighter, fed by the certainty that I was no longer just a mother cast out, but a force claiming what was hers. The keychain pulsed in my purse, its glow spilling through the seams, and I felt a tug like a tide pulling me towards something I couldn't yet name. Sarah noticed my distraction, her eyes narrowing. "You okay?" she asked. And for a moment I wanted to tell her about the hum, the visions, the lighthouse that seemed to live in my hand. But some truths were too raw to share, too fragile to name. "Just tired," I said, and she nodded, though her gaze lingered, as if she sensed the weight of what I carried. That afternoon I visited the Lottery Commission's regional office, a gray building that smelled of bureaucracy and stale air. The clerk, a woman with glasses perched on her nose, took my case number and pulled up the file. "You've got a strong claim, Ms. Collins," she said, her voice clipped but not unkind. "The signature on the ticket is clear and the footage backs it up. We've placed an administrative hold on the funds, 10 million minus taxes." She handed me a form, its lines demanding details I'd already given, but I filled it out. My pen steady, each word, a stroke of ink that felt like a spell. The keychain glowed in my purse, its light warm against my thigh, and the hum grew louder, a song that seemed to come from the building itself, as if the walls knew the truth I was fighting for. As I left the office, my phone buzzed, a voicemail from Eddie lighting up the screen. His voice was smooth, too smooth, like oil on water. "Martha, let's not make this complicated. Heather's willing to talk, maybe work something out. Call me." The words were a lure, a hook disguised as an olive branch, but I heard the tremor beneath them, the fear of a man who sensed the ground shifting. I saved the message not to respond, but to keep another piece in my mosaic of evidence. The keychain pulsed, and I saw it again. The lighthouse, its beam cutting through a storm of shadows. Its light not just a guide, but a weapon sharp and unyielding. I met Sarah again the next day. Her office now a war room, papers spread across the desk like a map of a battle I was ready to fight. She'd drafted a second letter, this one to the real estate company that had sold Heather the mansion, requesting records of the purchase. If she used the lottery funds, Sarah said, we can trace it. Every dollar leaves a trail. I nodded, the hum in my chest, a steady rhythm, now a heartbeat, that matched the keychain's glow. We added witness statements, Tom's signature on the transaction log, Denise's certification of the footage, Tammy's notarized affidavit confirming she'd seen the ticket on my fridge weeks before Heather's claim. Each document was a stone, a spell, a lighthouse beam cutting through the dark. Heather's messages came more frequently now, each one a step closer to desperation. Martha, we can settle this privately. No need for lawyers. Eddie says it's better for everyone if we keep it quiet. I didn't respond, but I saved every text, every voicemail, their words a map of their fear. One evening, I opened her social media and found a new post, a photo of her standing on the mansion's balcony. Her smile forced her caption, a single word: enough. The lighthouse magnet was visible in the background, its stripes faded, but unmistakable, a silent witness to the truth she couldn't erase. I printed the image, its timestamp, another brick in my wall. The keychain glowed brighter that night, its light spilling across the table, casting a spiral pattern that seemed to move, to breathe. I held it up, feeling its weight, and the hum became a song, a chant of salt and iron that filled the room. I saw the lighthouse again, clearer now, its beam not just cutting through the storm, but shaping it, bending the shadows to its will. I understood in a way that went beyond words that this fight was more than money, more than a ticket. It was about claiming what was mine, not just for me, but for the girl Heather had been, for the life I'd built, with every sacrifice, every stroke of ink. Sarah called the next morning, her voice sharp with news. The commission's scheduled a hearing, she said. 2 weeks from now. They're taking your claim seriously, Martha. The hold on the funds is solid, and Heather's been notified. I felt the flame in my chest flare, a beacon that matched the keychain's glow. What about her lawyer? I asked, my voice steady, though the hum pulsed through me, urging me to stand taller. They're stalling, Sarah said, her tone dry but confident, sending vague responses, asking for extensions. It's a sign they're worried. She paused, then added, You've got this, Martha. You've built a case they can't ignore. I thanked her, the words simple but heavy, and hung up. The keychain was warm in my hand, its light steady now, as if it knew the end was near. Not an end, but a beginning, a reclamation of what I'd never truly lost. That evening I walked to the edge of town where the river met the road, its water glinting under the moon like a mirror for truths too big to hold. I stood there, the keychain in my hand, its glow brighter than the stars. Its hum a song that seemed to rise from the river itself. I saw the lighthouse one last time, its beam sweeping across a sea of shadows, its light not just a guide, but a promise that truth once named cannot be undone. I thought of Heather, her eyes clouded with a hunger that wasn't hers alone, and I felt a pang not of anger, but of sorrow for the girl who'd once believed in stars that stayed put. I returned to my apartment, the keychain glowing softly, its spiral pattern a map of the path I'd walked. The notebook lay open, its pages filled with numbers, dates, truths. I wrote one final entry. Hearing set. Lighthouse lit. The hum was quiet now, a gentle pulse like the tide settling after a storm. I set the keychain beside the notebook, its light spilling across the table, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. This was my victory, not in money, but in claiming what was mine. My name, my truth, my light. The hearing was 2 weeks away, but I wasn't afraid. The keychain glowed, the hum sang, and I knew I was Martha Collins, keeper of a lighthouse, bearer of a truth that no storm could drown. Heather thought she'd won, But she hadn't seen the back of the ticket. She hadn't seen me. And as I stepped toward the door ready to face the final chapter, the moon cast a silver path before me, a road lit by a light only I could carry.